taking the time to chat to us today. I know you've probably spoken for hours and hours about your books and the different concepts within the books, but I am going to ask you to go over them a little bit more again now. But I wanted to start off, first of all, asking you, you've got, every book that you've written is a bestseller. Tipping Point was kind of a breakout book for a lot of people that, for me personally, that kind of changed the way that I saw books and looked at the world. But what is it that really excites you? What is it that gets you out of the bed in the morning? Is it the fact that you're an acclaimed international author? Is it the fact that a young kid understands your concepts? Is it getting a great story? What is it that really kind of gets you going and gets you excited?
I think just curiosity about things, the knowledge that there's many, many things I don't know, and that would be fascinating to learn about, fun to learn about. I don't know if it's any different today than it ever was. I mean, I feel like the same thing gets me out of bed now than got me out of bed when I was a 10-year-old going to school. It seems like the same feeling.
Okay, and what is it that you're most proud of? Is it an article that you've written in a book, or is it just stories that you've been able to piece together? Well, what has been the highlight?
It's funny because I don't really have. I never think of it as. I don't think of it as being, as my career as being a series of specific accomplishments. I just think of it as one long process. So I don't really have a highlight. I mean, I've just enjoyed myself. I mean, I've just had a continuous streak of enjoyment, I guess is the rest of it. I mean, you know, it's like there's no. I don't feel like each book is a kind of mountain that I've climbed, and then I put that accomplishment on my wall. I sort of feel like I've been engaged in thinking and talking to people and writing, and it's a continuous process that makes me happy.
Well, I think you're probably one of the luckiest people in the world then to have that continuous happy enjoyment, and I think is what everybody's after. If we can talk about Outliers, the whole premise of the book is really kind of, and correct me if I'm wrong, the 10,000 hours rule, but more importantly, in the environments that people are brought up in. I was fascinated by the two real stories of the Chinese rice farmers, which I think was one of your favorite as well, and the Jewish immigrants. Is it possible, and I know you've probably been asked to talk about this a lot and have done it hundreds of times, can you just talk us through those two parts of the book, please?
Yeah. Well, the Chinese rice farmers, I was trying to understand why it is that Asians seem to do so well in mathematics compared to other cultures. And I started out by pointing out that mathematics, doing well in mathematics for most of us, is a simple function of your willingness to work hard. There's no secret to it. It's if you can focus and be disciplined and put in the hours, you can learn the concepts necessary to grasp things like calculus. And then I sort of wondered, well, is it the case that cultures differ in their attitude towards work? And the striking thing about Asian culture is how much the notion of hard work is celebrated, and more than celebrated, how much it is at the center of their understanding of what it means to be a productive member of society. And that, you know, it's very interesting to think about that in the context of rice farming, which has really been the central activity of much of the history of places like China. What most people did was they were rice farmers. And rice farming is unique among farming in that it's a kind of farming which is all about hard work. It requires infinitely more hours than the equivalent kind of farming that my ancestors or yours did in Western Europe in medieval times. So it's sort of fascinating to think about, to wonder if this isn't a case where the specific cultural heritage that people have ends up inadvertently proving to be incredibly useful in the modern world. You know, so that was one. That was why I was so interested in that aspect of and then the Jewish immigrant part was I was fascinated by the success of Jewish immigrants in the New World in America, and was particularly interested in telling the story of the ways in which the kind of particular cultural legacies they brought to America. And there's many, but one of the most obvious ones was that through sort of sheer chance, many Jewish immigrants had been involved in the garment business in the old world. And they arrived in America at precisely the moment when the garment business was the fastest growing, most entrepreneurial, most potentially lucrative, most wide open industry in the country. So it's, again, this lovely case where the skills that you learn sort of historically by virtue of your cultural heritage turn out, for purest good fortune, to be beautifully adapted to the modern world. And that's not the whole explanation for why Jews have done so well in the United States and Canada, but it's a big part of it. You know, it's sort of, and that's the sort of thing I was interested in exploring in Outliers. How much success is this kind of fortunate, there is fortunate coincidences, these lucky matches between people's heritages and the skills that are demanded of the times they live in.
And that was one thing that was quite interesting as well, because you seem to kind of take away or ignore the effort of the human being themselves. And is that just because it's been covered a lot, it doesn't interest you, and you're saying it's more important to look at the environment because not many people do that? Because do you still believe that it takes, there's a kind of, not innate talent, because I know that you feel against that as well, but how much rests on the shoulders of the individual themselves as well?
I mean, obviously an enormous amount, but I think you're right in the sense that I feel we know that, right? And we talk about it endlessly. And, you know, we don't lack for focus on the individual in Western, many societies. What we lack, I felt, was a proper understanding of the role of environment and culture. So it was really a question. I was trying to get people to say, all right. Yes, to succeed, you need to take responsibility, to be hardworking, to be talented. But let's take a step back and talk about what else has to happen.
Okay. And something that you said once, which I really loved, is you define talent as not an innate gifting within somebody, but rather the desire to practice, and that it was based on passion, which for me I love, because that just, and it goes back to kind of the 10,000 hours. It means that anybody can really achieve anything if they put their all behind it and they do those 10,000 hours.
It is. Talent's such a weird word, and we use it all the time, and we're not always specific enough about what we mean by that word. And I sort of think talent is equal parts some kind of innate quality, which is, it's true. You know, there are. Mozart has an innate capacity for music composition and performance that many of us do not, right? That's clearly part of it. But there's another part to talent which isn't about some kind of genetic hardwired ability, but it's about joy. It's about wanting to do something. And when I look at very successful people, talented people, I see joy as much as I see some inherent ability. When I look at a great football player, I'm impressed by their raw athletic ability. But more than that, when you figure out and see how many hours they spend practicing football, you realize they love the game in a way that most people don't. And it's very hard for me to figure out where the talent stops and the love starts. It's clear that what we see in great accomplishment is some combination of those two things.
Another part of your book that you spoke about, which you start your book off with, and I think has kind of changed the way that parents are starting to send their kids to school, is when kids are born.
Yeah.
I did a little exercise on my side because I'm from South Africa and we are crazy about soccer and rugby in this country. And our rugby team has been world champions twice, and I wanted to look at our rugby players and see if it was consistent with the ice hockey guys. And what I found was, what I found was that 50% of the squad was born between March and July, and 70% of them were born in 3 months, being April, May, and June. So it's not the 1st of Jan, but there's definitely something there.
Well, it depends when. Yeah, the system only. Remember, this whole argument only works if there is a youth development, a very, very strong system of developing young people that has sort of all-star teams at an early age and an age cutoff where that all-star teams are organized around. You have to have those components in place. Yeah. So I need to know what's the age cutoff for age class rugger, and that would tell us.
Okay. Well, and that's what I just wanted to start investigating. But what was interesting about it is it runs from the 1st of Jan till that's the kind of when the age starts. But most of the players that were born across those 3 months were from a specific region as well within South Africa, which is Joburg and Pretoria, which I think you've been to. So I want to look at that, but and that's really what I love about your writing. I think what grips most people is you're able to take these really irrelevant, random stories and pull them together and find an interline twine. What is the process that you go through? And do you have kind of like just a massive documents folder on your laptop, or a book that you scribbled in different research and stories, or do you like a beautiful mind mapping on the wall? Or how do you do that? Because is it often that you just keep a story and hold on to it for later, or what is that you go through?
I mean, it's a really good question. I don't really understand it myself. I guess I'm a little bit like a magpie. I collect these things. I'm always on the lookout for stories that will help me illustrate complicated topics, ideas. I don't have a kind of formal collection, but it's my job to read a lot and collect things. And so I do semi-deliberately go about and ask the question when I run across an interesting story, is that something that might actually prove useful to me someday? So there is you have to spend a fair amount of time and energy scrounging around for interesting things. So that's a good deal of my job, is essentially that. It's kind of reading and talking to people and collecting stuff and making little notes to myself and squirreling things away. So these things don't happen by accident.
You say that you also write to challenge your own feelings, your assumptions, and theories. Is there something that you had a theory about that you went out and researched and challenged and was really surprised or shocked by what came out?
Yeah, I guess I've been... So Outliers, or my book Blink, for example, really changed my mind about the meaning of prejudice. I had been someone who thought that particularly racial prejudice was something that we had surmounted. It was, in the United States and in many Western countries, it was a thing of the past, and we were really dealing with the kind of residue of it, and that was it. And that book really made me realize, no, that's wrong, that it's a much more powerful and insidious force that shapes us, our judgments, even when we don't realize it. In Outliers, I was surprised by things like when I was doing that thing about football and soccer and hockey, I was surprised by the size of those kinds of effects, about just how much elite systems are a function of arbitrary advantages. That sort of stunned me. I thought that I thought that the way in which talent is collected is pretty efficient. I realize it's not efficient at all. So yeah, every time I'm motivated to do these books in large part because I'll uncover something and I'm like, oh my goodness, that's so different from what I thought. And that makes me think that readers would be interested in having the same epiphany as I did.
Yeah, and I mean, and based on what you're saying now as well, you also said where America has is great at developing the human potential of the top 10%, and kind of ignoring the bottom 90%. But then you also have the example of the school called KIPP.
Yeah.
Is that a great example of how to break the rule or be the exception?
Yeah. What's exciting about KIPP is that in the American context, it is a radical concept to focus squarely on the middle of the curve. KIPP does not pretend to be a school for elite students. In America, we're obsessed with elite students. We do everything in our power to create the most extraordinary facilities and opportunities for people who are very, very talented. That's just one of the particular features of American society. It's very focused on high performers. And KIPP says they're indifferent. You don't take an exam to get in, it's a lottery. They accept what they've been given, and they say, we're just trying to get everyone in our system to perform to their best potential. And I'd love to see a lot more of that. I think that it's time for America to say, you know what, we do everything necessary. We've done a great job of providing for the top part of the distribution. Let's focus on the middle. Let's see if we can provide opportunities for ordinary kids who want to do better, okay, who are willing to work hard. I love that notion of focusing on the ordinary kid.
Yeah. And I actually wanted to ask you this, and I don't know how much thought you've given it, but I have this personal feeling that our education system, or particularly in South Africa's got one of the worst in the world, unfortunately, but education all around doesn't really prepare the person properly for the world. When I read your book, The Tipping Point at 20, I was like, man, why don't they have this kind of stuff in school? Why can't we learn this? Why can't we be challenged to think differently? And there's so much out there currently that we have access to that schools are just kind of being left behind, in my personal view. So maths is important and all of that. But have you ever given a thought to if you could design kind of the ultimate kind of school, what kind of content or how you would teach kids or anything?
Yeah. I mean, I thought a little bit about that. I do think that, and I think we're moving in this direction. I think that school teaching, learning should be a lot more cross-disciplinary from an early age. I think it's probably a mistake in the modern world to educate, to make these kinds of strict mental divisions between subjects, among subjects. The thing about my books is that they're about sociology, they're about psychology, they're about history, they're about all these things, because I don't see a distinction between them. I sort of feel I can tell you one story and I can teach you things from all those different perspectives. And I think that's why they appeal to people. And I think schools should do that. I mean, if I was doing a school, I would love to teach a class where I took a single story, historical story, and teach it from 5 or 6 different perspectives. I'd love to teach a course on the Second World War and just talk about everything from the physics of airplanes to military tactics to what happens to somebody psychologically when they go through a battle to the politics of the different countries, to what Hitler was like and how weird he was, to anti-Semitism, to, you could spend an entire year just using that one extraordinarily powerful and fascinating story to shine a light on 1,000 different things. I mean, can you imagine how kind of cool, what if we took a year of high school and taught nothing the Second World War? right?
Yeah.
And had everybody chip in, every single discipline chipped in and used, we could do physics just about, remember the Germans developed V2 rockets at the end of the war? That's, the whole subject, we could do a whole class of physics that just talks about weapons, right? And people wouldn't even realize they were learning physics, right? We could sneak it by them. So, I mean, there's actually, we ought to be, the problem is we've gotten so obsessed with tests and trying to measure everything very precisely that we've given up the opportunity to be really creative in the way we teach things. We could expand it. We could have a high school where every year we just taught one story, right? Maybe the first year is not a battle, but something else. Maybe the first year is if it's in South Africa, it's the story of apartheid, how it started, why it started, and then use that as a jumping off point to examine things from five different perspectives. You can, just in describing democracy is on one level a course in mathematics, right? Question of how do you represent people as numbers and systems and make them and create balanced representation and so you can see how in every one of these complex stories there are multiple opportunities.
And I see you are fairly excited about this. So when we set something up, we're going to give you a call to come and do you'll be our VIP professor. Storytelling is obviously very powerful, and we're hearing a lot more and seeing a lot more where brands and companies are starting to tell stories and evolve. Do you see this growing even further, or is this just kind of something that's just happening and is around and people need to get to grips with, or is this is this a proper? I don't know what I'm trying to say. Is exactly like you're saying now with education and how we're seeing with games and gamification and that. Are we going to get into space where we are able to simplify things and make it more easily digestible in all aspects of life? And is storytelling kind of crucial to that and at the center of that?
I hope so. I mean, I think that one of the great promises of the internet is how it can, this whole notion now that you can, if we have great teachers or great storytellers, through the internet, everybody can watch them. And so teaching becomes transformed. Teaching becomes about one-on-one encounters, but lectures at their best are really just that storytelling. That kind of storytelling, we can have the best storytellers in the world reach everybody. And then we can use the teacher in the classroom to play a different function, to be much more of a tutor than that's one small example, and that's happening right now. That's the direction education seems to be going. But that does suggest to me that because storytelling is hard, right, it's very difficult to do well. And the great promise of the internet is it allows us to give everyone access to the top, to the best. And so I do think there's going to be a move in that direction.
And so, do you have a favorite story? Is something that you've read in the last couple of years, or that you have as a kid, or something that just really, and you probably do have that, but something that epitomizes the best story that you've heard or read? Yeah.
Very well. I have a new book coming out, which is going to be called David and Goliath, and it starts with the biblical story of David and Goliath. And biblical stories are amazing stories. They're so much of what we do is a kind of stories we tell are in many cases elaborations or versions of biblical stories. So I've been sort of fascinated by the kind of power and beauty and simplicity of some of those central biblical narratives. So that's a kind of, the story of David and Goliath by itself is just an extraordinary, incredibly powerful story that we've been sort of wrestling with ever since, right? And we use constantly reference those terms. It's been embedded in our society. and then for my new book, actually, I've gotten really into stories about these confrontations between the weak and the strong. And they're incredibly powerful and fascinating. And we keep coming back to them. We can't get enough of those kinds of asymmetrical confrontations.
When you told me that you had a new book out, I pity you couldn't see my face. It just lit up, and I got very excited there.
Still a year away. Still a year away.
A year away. All right. Well, we'll be counting the days. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Well, I'm just interested in what happens when the powerful and the weak clash.
Okay.
How do those conflicts work? Why don't they turn out the way we think they're going to turn out? Do we get them right? Do we accurately, conflicts between the strong and the weak, we call them that because we have things that we identify as strength and things we identify as weak. Are those categories accurate? That's a really big question. If I see David and Goliath and I say David's the underdog and Goliath is the favorite, why do I think that? If I see Nelson Mandela fighting apartheid and I say he's the underdog and the white establishment of South Africa is the favorite, why do I think that? What made me think that he's not as powerful as they are? I mean, that's the sort of stuff I'm playing with, trying to kind of get to the root of our understanding of advantage, and to kind of challenge it a little bit.
And so, what does an average day for you look like then when you're writing or preparing for a book? Because I know that you say that you're not a routinized person.
Yeah. Well, a lot of writing is about logistics. Sadly, it's not about writing. It's about trying to set up the writing. Writing is the least time-consuming part of my job, of my life. So mostly my days are figuring out what to write, figuring out who to talk to so that I can write something, figuring out, just really boring stuff. Like there's a couple of people for this chapter I'm working on now I really want to write, want to talk to. They're hard to track down. It's hard to get on the schedule. It's hard to, there's a woman I need to talk to for another chapter. She lives in Winnipeg. Winnipeg's a long way away. Got to go there. There's all this kind of prepare for the interview her, think about the interview her, transcribe the interview, think about the transcription of the interview. That takes 10 times longer than actually writing the little section.
Okay. So
it's a lot of, and it took me weeks to figure out whether I wanted to talk to her. Was she the right person to talk to? Would her story fit? So it's like, that's a lot of what writing is kind of trial and error and preparation.
Okay. I've in my research when I was trying to find a little bit more out about you, I did come across that there were some people that give you a little bit of I don't know if this is a South African word or if you'll understand it, flack.
Oh yeah.
Right, cool. Which my mom always used to tell me that the tallest trees gather catch the most wind. But does it even? And my question is really kind of: have you ever kind of written something where you've actually gone a few years later and said, "Oh, maybe that isn't the point. Maybe I was a little bit off there." But does it even matter? Because for me, my outtake is really that your writing is more about getting people to question things, to look at things differently, to offer a different perspective, and to not just take everything that's thrown at them as they normally take. So it's a two-part question: is have you? And the first part doesn't even really matter, but is it more about getting people to question it versus looking at it and saying, actually, maybe I was off there?
Well, I think both the things you said are correct. So I think it's very important for writers like myself to take chances. And that means that sometimes you take a chance and it doesn't work. You fall on your face. And sometimes I fall on my face. I write things that in retrospect, I learn a lot after they come out. I think, oh, you know what? I probably oversimplified that or overstated that or took a turn here and I should have taken a turn there. So critics are very important. Even when they're nasty, they're very important. You learn something. Every time you write something, you learn something that hopefully helps you the next time. So I welcome, it's difficult sometimes when someone's really goes after you, but glad they do, because I'm a better writer for it. And then the second part's also true as well, that I'm trying to provoke people, not in a irritating way, but in a kind of profound way. I want people to re-examine what they believe. And I don't want them, I'm not trying to convert them to my position. I'm trying to make them think. I'm fine if you read my books and don't agree with me. But all I want you to do is, at least for a moment, to consider the possibility that things might be different than you thought. And if I get you to do that, I've won. And I feel I've gotten a lot of people to do that. But you don't have to be, look, my views on the world are kind of weird and wacky. If everyone agreed with me, it would be boring. But I do, if I can just get people to move a couple degrees in one direction, even for a couple of years, a couple of moments, then I'm happy.
And that kind of leads me into, I've got two more questions from that, is that you're a very open-minded individual. Are there things that irritate you, frustrate you about society, about people, that you just wish that, like, there's one thing that you wish that they would stop doing and the world would be a better place?
Yeah, I think people, I think the disagreement gets personal too quickly. It's not, because I disagree with you doesn't mean that you're a bad person, which is like something that we're told as 6-year-olds. But it's amazing how often we forget that. The internet is, my problem with a lot of commentary on the internet is that everything's personalized. Why is it personalized? I would love if discussion was a little more civil. I'd like it to be more intellectually spirited and less personal. I mean, I want people to, don't sugarcoat it. Come after me, but just don't come after me as a person. Come after me for my ideas. That's one thing. And I wish people were more willing to be wrong. And it sort of goes with the first thing. Take chances. And feel free to say when you're wrong, I was wrong. That's fine. I'm actually happy when people... I don't think it's a crime to be wrong, and even a crime to be wrong a lot. I think it's a crime to pretend that you're not wrong. And it's a crime never to take never to do anything so risky that you take the chance of being wrong. To be incredibly predictable and safe in the way that you think, that's the problem. That doesn't get us anywhere. You've
got quite a decent career, and you're far from finished, but are there any important lessons that you've learned being a writer that you think are profoundly important that you can share with us? Or even, not even profoundly, but are important to know?
Well, there's some really simple ones. I think that, and it doesn't just apply to writers, I think people who create things shouldn't be in a hurry. The most important thing I've learned as a writer over the course of my career is to slow down. If it's worth doing, it's worth doing well. If you have, don't let anyone, often happens with writers that other people impose arbitrary deadlines on them. And so you rush something, you do 3 drafts when you should have done 10, you forget that high quality things take a lot more time than average things. And so make sure you have enough time to do the high quality thing. It's weird to talk about time management as being, and patience as being central, but they're central to everything that's good, I think, is you give yourself a chance to kind of ruminate on something. It's like, not everything has to be done instantaneously.
And how much of that is the writer's in the writer's control and in the publisher's control?
Well, I mean, it's a little bit of both. The writers have to make sure that they discipline themselves so they leave themselves enough time, and publishers have to acknowledge, I think, that speeding things up too much imposes a cost on the quality of the work.
I'm going to ask you a question now just about publishing, because publishing is obviously changing, and anyone can now upload a book onto Amazon and self-publish all these ebooks, and it's changing the way that people consume books. How does that affect someone like you as an author and as a writer? And has it changed your view of what you're going to be doing in the future, or is it just kind of...
Hasn't changed anything that I do. I don't mind. I'm indifferent to how someone reads my work, whether they're on a Kindle, on an iPad, on a physical book, on a book, on whether they're listening to me read it on an audiobook. It doesn't matter. It's all the same. Whether they come to hear me speak. I'm in the business of reaching people with my thoughts, and it doesn't matter to me how they choose to receive me. I just would like to be listened to.
Okay. I've got a quick question for advice to young writers. And I've read somewhere before that you've said that most young writers give up before they hit the 10,000 hour mark, halfway through there. What is your advice to young writers? And part of that question as well, and I don't know if it's a separate question, is what would your advice be to an 18-year-old version of Malcolm Gladwell?
It would be to think of what you're doing as what you understand is going to take you your entire 20s to get good. That's the starting thing. That you're just no one goes to medical school expecting on the second week of medical school to be able to do brain surgery. Writing, because it appears so much easier, we think, oh, you should be able to master it quickly. No, it's every bit as hard as brain surgery. So look at when people go out on their own as brain surgeons. What are they? They're 33, 34. Well, you should have the same expectation. That's one thing. And also, but that's not a bad thing. I mean, the process by which you teach yourself how to be a good writer is really, really fun. I mean, it's insanely fun. You get to the idea of doing something where you can witness yourself improve, keep improving year after year after year. It's just there's so much joy in that. So that's the first thing I guess I would tell them. And then the second thing I would say is that you should write about what you care about. No matter how nerdy or narrow it seems, what people respond to in writing is passion. People think they're only interested in three things. They're not. People are interested in everything, so long as it is communicated with joy, with interest. We can smell a fake. The thing that all readers can do is smell a fake a mile away. If you're faking it, you're finished. And that's the thing. And we can also smell genuine passion a mile away. And passion is intoxicating. It's the most exciting thing in the world. And if you can deliver that to people, you'll always be successful.
But that advice is so liberating, because it keeps people true to who they are, and they can't go wrong with that. I wanted to ask you, what resources do you use to, and I can say the phrase, to keep give you the edge, or to keep you kind of peaking or at 100%, or what do you use to stimulate? You're obviously consuming a lot of material, but are there people that you go to for intellectual stimulation, or books you read, or things you look at, or what do you do?
There's no formula. I mean, I try to expose myself to a lot of interesting people. I try to read very widely, deliberately read things that I wouldn't normally think I was interested in. Go to the library a lot, get lots of sleep.
Get lots of sleep.
There's no mystery to it. It's just be kind of, but you have to kind of formally open yourself up to the world. That's the key thing.
Okay. And any of your greatest books that you can recommend?
Oh, it's such an impossible question because I just love so many books. it's all about what I'm reading now. I'm reading lots of books on the American Civil Rights Movement, and they're fascinating to me. I mean, um, but the list of books that have challenged and inspired me is in the hundreds by now. So there's no one I can point to.
How many books do you think you have read?
Oh, I mean, thousands. I have no way of counting them. I mean, I suppose I read at least a couple a week, 2, 3 a week.
Okay.
Some weeks more. Going back since I was a kid, so I don't even know what that adds up to.
And do you have an e-reader, or do you read
I like to read. I tend to read on real books. I like to mark books up with a pen.
Yeah.
Keep them in my library, and they form. My brain is really represented in my library.
Okay.
So.
I love to highlight my books as well. So all the books are highlighted, and then I got a Kindle, and then I started using that and highlighting the Kindle. But then what I realized now was that you can't highlight too much in a Kindle because it obviously thinks that you're copying it. So I've got a few books that I've highlighted that there's all this data that's lost, and now I'm peeved at Kindle, and I'm going to start complaining to Amazon.
Yeah.
But what do you what goes through your brain when you're not actively working and you're maybe walking to the library or in the shower? I would love to see what goes on in your brain and the stories that are happening, what you're thinking about. Is there any chance that you can give us or open your brain up just for a second on that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just incredibly varied. It depends whether I'm working on something that's sort of problematic or whether I'm daydreaming about my book or I'm thinking about, friends and loved ones, or it's just this. I just think that it's important. I try to set aside time for that kind of daydreaming. When I go running, I don't wear an iPod because I want to enjoy my thoughts. I don't want to be interrupted. I try to make sure that I eat one meal a day by myself so I can sit and think, and so all those kinds of things I build in time for daydreaming, but I don't try and what I daydream about differs, every day. But it's just it's a matter of kind of leaving myself open to that kind of free range thinking.
All right, and so is it more kind of an abstract process where it's free range, or is there a little bit of formula that you've gained over the years as well, where you try and look at things from different angles, or look at it from the opposite side, or you ask specific questions when you're looking at a situation?
Well, I just wonder. I'm just basically asking the question: how interesting is that? How unusual? How weird? How does it lead anywhere? Is it a kind of does it connect me to some other thought? Those are all the kinds of. Is there a story attached to it? Those are all the kinds of questions that I ask myself when I run across something.
Is there anything weird about you, or a personal quirk, or something that you're compulsive about or obsessive about that makes you different to other people?
No, I'm really boring and normal.
There's got to be something now, because I interview a few people and I always ask them this, and it's from one guy says he's obsessive about wine gums, which is a sweet here in South Africa. Is there anything like that?
No, I really am kind of normal and boring. I mean, I'm a big runner.
Yeah.
I suppose I'm obsessive about exercise.
Okay.
I don't really. Gladwells are very, 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 very normal. We're not extreme people at all. My father would go to work and come home and garden and walk his dog, and then would repeat that day every day for 50 years. We're not people who are. We're not eccentric in the slightest. I'm the least eccentric person.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not. I'm a little bit solitary, but that's, a necessary part of my job, I guess.
And with your running, how often do you run, and what kind of distances do you do?
Well, I'm an old man now, so I don't run like I used to, but I run every other day, 6 miles, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Try to run under 7-minute miles.
Wow, okay. Where I live in Cape Town, we have one of the most beautiful running tracks. It's along the sea and the cliffs. It's called the Sea Point Promenade. So if you ever come down to Cape Town, go for a run there.
All right.
Is it true that you drive a VW Golf?
GTI. Yep, I'm a big car guy.
Okay.
So I'm very fond of my little GTI, although it's in the shop right now, which is disturbing me.
What happened to it?
I didn't. A friend of mine borrowed it, and it didn't start. I think it's the alternator, but
okay.
It's a great little car.
Okay, that's great. Because you said that you're more fascinated by that car than a Ferrari, because the challenge is a lot higher to build something like that at that cost price.
Like a great $30,000 car is vastly more interesting than a great $100,000 car. Cars get too. Problem is, the fancy cars are too convoluted, and there's no simplicity to them. You know, it's like I want a car with a key that I stick in the lock, and with a stick shift, and it doesn't have 900 little gadgets and gizmos built into it.
I absolutely agree. I wish I could show you a photograph of my car. It's a VW Golf City Golf.
Oh, you too?
Yeah, as well. Because I just need a car from A to B, and I can't. It kills me to pay money for a car that does stuff that you don't need and whatnot. So I was really excited that you did the same. I'm going to start wrapping up now. I've got a few quick questions left, but I wanted to ask you. You've been interviewed hundreds of thousands of times. What questions do you hate getting asked, and what question do you wish you would get asked? Or is that one of the questions you hate getting asked?
No. I don't know what I hate getting asked. You don't hate questions. You hate, hate's too strong a word, but sometimes you don't like the person interviewing you. But if you like the person interviewing you, there's no such thing as a bad question. It's more about the kind of, interview is a little mini relationship. It's about, do you trust the person? Do you have a good feel for their motives, that kind of thing. Questions, I wish I was, the questions you want to be asked about are the stuff that that are irrelevant. I love to talk about, track and field for an hour and a half, or cars, but no one really is interested in my views on cars and track and field, so.
Well, are you looking forward to the Olympics coming up?
I am very much, yeah.
I got two more questions. This next question is quite deep, and I ask it because you can kind of tell something about a person. But what do you believe is the meaning of life? What is this all about?
Well, I just think that's obviously a huge.
Yeah.
I think our responsibility is to try and leave the world a little bit better than we found it. It's a very trite thing to say, but I think that says it all, right? At the end of the day, you should be a positive force, and net positive. And you can do that in a million different ways. And that's within the power of everybody on the planet. So I think that's probably the simplest way to say what life is about.
My final question is to ask you, who do you think I should interview next? And what do you think I should ask them?
Oh, goodness. What an interesting question. Wow. I have no idea. There's so many possibilities. I guess I would interview somebody, I'd be curious to interview someone who was good at some very, very, very specific thing and get at this question of passion, about how much of their talent is actually passion. That would be a really interesting thing to explore with somebody. Someone who did something very, very narrow, not something grand, something very specific, and sort of walk them through their motivation would be really interesting.
Well, just on that, do you know Lewis Gordon Pugh, the guy who swam in the Arctic?
I don't know him, but that's the kind of, that'd be a great question.
Yeah. I'll send you a link because he's got a book called Achieving the Impossible, and he's just a normal, average guy, but he has this passion to swim in cold water, where his mind psychologically is able to increase his body temperature, internal body temperature. And he's just driven by this passion and this desire, and he absolutely loves. You can put him in freezing water for 12 hours, and he's just happy. And when you're talking earlier about passion and talents and that, he popped into my mind as somebody. So I'll send you the link to, and his book's on Amazon. You'll probably enjoy it.
All right. Good. Well, thank you so much, Jason.
No, Malcolm, thank you very much.
Okay, good.
Cheers, Malcolm. Good luck with the book.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.